Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Commission press conference on the reform of the electricity market design. I have alongside me Energy Commissioner Kadri Simson, and I will give the floor directly to her. Commissioner.
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon. The Commission has today adopted a revision to the European electricity market design, and this revision was announced by President von der Leyen last September, and we have today finalized this key proposal to complement the many other reforms this Commission has proposed to cushion the impacts of the energy crisis during the past year. And our today's reform package includes the revised electricity regulation, the electricity directive, and the remit regulation. For over 2 decades, the electricity market design has served European companies and consumers well, letting them enjoy the benefits of a single market. However, the energy crisis spurred by Russia's attack on Ukraine exposed a number of shortcomings in the current system which needed to be addressed. And the current framework has focused too much on short-term markets. In many national markets, there are hardly forward instruments with a maturity beyond 3 years. The dominance of the short-term market has amplified the effects of the gas price rise and has been the source of various problems during the crisis. And this has been felt by consumers who have been exposed to wholesale prices that are too often dictated by the price of gas-fired power plants. And they have not been able to benefit from the growing share of lower-cost renewables. And the current market system falls short also as we are getting ready to decarbonize our electricity market. By 2030, we will need much more electricity to power our economy, and this electricity should be coming increasingly from intermittent renewables. To stay on track to meet our Green Deal targets, the EU should triple its renewables deployment rate. Therefore, this reform contains a number of measures to improve the renewables investment conditions. European consumers have been hit by high bills due to the dynamic contracts linked to spot prices, while some retailers, not hedging their trade, have gone bankrupt when spot prices at wholesale level skyrocketed, leaving thousands of consumers stranded. And our today's proposal addresses the above-mentioned shortcomings and will make the European electricity market fit for future. The measures we are proposing today will have an impact on 3 areas. First, the reform will aim to make the energy bills of the European consumers and companies more independent from the short-term market prices. To decouple consumer prices from the short-term markets, we propose to expand the role of long-term instruments. We introduce measures to boost the market for power purchase agreements and enhance the flexibility of the electricity system through storage and demand response measures. Second, the reform will accelerate the deployment of renewables. We will require the member states to use two-way contracts for difference when they grant subsidies to new investment intended to promote new low carbon and renewable generation. The revenues from these contracts will have to be channeled back to all end consumers to reduce their final electricity bills. This will stabilize prices for producers and ensure that consumers can benefit more directly from lower-cost renewables. And third, the reform will improve consumer protection. We will allow consumers to have more than 1 meter and different contracts to serve their electric vehicle, heat pumps, or domestic consumption. And we introduce a right to energy sharing. And with these proposals, we do believe that in the coming years, our consumers will be more protected. Today's reform is parcel of the ongoing competitiveness debate. Energy prices are one of the key factors that companies consider before deciding where to invest. And this reform will preserve the benefits of an integrated single European electricity market. And the measures we are proposing today will gradually help reduce the costs of producing and using energy in Europe through more renewables. We are improving the access to markets and to more stable long-term contracts through the power purchase agreements, which can drive investments in renewables, which is essential so that we will reach our Green Deal goals. The two-way contracts for difference for member states guarantee a stable price to producers and consumers, will foster support for new renewable energy investment. And these two instruments will be key to enhancing the stability and predictability of energy costs across the EU and therefore essential in boosting EU's competitiveness. It is fitting that today's decision was taken here in the European Parliament. Ideally, this marks the transition from Article 122 crisis emergency legislation to more structural reforms turned towards the future. It is now for co-legislators to negotiate this reform so that it can become a law. And I call on the Parliament to treat this file as a priority so that we can conclude the work on this essential and hopefully last piece of our legislative response to the energy crisis as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I now give the floor to colleagues for questions. Rob, first of all.
Rob Herbout for VRT, Belgian Television. During the past year, many suppliers stopped providing fixed price contracts. If I understand it well, the Commission wants to insert an obligation to provide such fixed price contracts. And what happens if a consumer decides to switch to another supplier? Does he have to pay a compensation for that?
Indeed, this is a part of our proposal. So far, since the last revision of electricity market design, we promoted flexible pricing contracts because fixed price was a legacy. But now we do see that consumers should also have a right to opt for less risky options. That means fixed price contracts, and this is the part of the proposal. On top of that, we will argue that consumers should have a right for several contracts so that they can, for example, cover their consumption with fixed price, but charge their electric vehicle at these hours when prices are low based on flexible contract. And detailed implementation at national level will follow after we have finalized our legislative proposal with co-legislators.
Thank you, Commissioner. Stefano in the back, and then I'll take one.
Thank you. Commissioner, you said that this reform improves the renewable investment conditions. Don't you think that the reform you're proposing is just doing that and not actually reforming the power market? Thanks.
Indeed, we do believe that PPAs will be beneficial for future investments in renewables because they give predictability also to the future to host the future investment decisions. And if there is a necessity for state aid that has been in case for the past years, then we will instruct member states to opt for contracts for difference. And that is a design that allows us to expect that in the next years, the share of renewables will grow rapidly. Unless we will achieve that, it is very difficult to achieve our 2030 targets on renewables.
Thank you. Susanna?
Thank you. Still on the fixed priced, actually, and the fact that the consumers might have the possibility to choose and even mix contracts and different tariffs. I would like to understand how do you expect to implement this in countries where, for instance, it is difficult to have smart, I don't know, I'm not sure about this translation, but to have smart meters and smart plugs. So, for instance, in Portugal, I think it's not going to be easy to have this possibility to mix, to have a a fixed price for domestic consumption and then a different contract for to charge your electric car. So I'd like to understand if how do you think this is going to be feasible, and when do you expect this to be in place? So what are you exactly asking to the legislators? And just a last question, if I may, also because Portugal was asking for us for the Commission to set a minimum threshold for long-term contracts. It's true that you are promoting long-term contracts, but there is no minimum threshold. Don't you think this is actually not enough?
Indeed, to allow us to accommodate more renewables, our grids have to be digitalized, and flexibility is a key. So this electricity market reform will also address the demand response that is impossible unless smart meters are distributed. And that means that member states have to work at that side. And the right to have several contracts for consumers means also that they have the right for several meters. So member states do know, since we last time negotiated the electricity market and so-called clean energy package for all citizens, that they have to invest into grid developments, and they have to digitalize their grids. Without that, it is very difficult to use the potential that we have on demand response side. And demand response side is a key to cut at peak hours gas consumption. Now, on long-term contracts, indeed, PPA is not a new concept, but all across Europe there have been average 100 projects, and this is clearly not sufficient. So right now we will promote this scheme because this gives clear predictability for developers, and we have to keep in mind that it was only 3 years ago when electricity prices were very low. But it also allows consumers, not only industry, but also small and medium enterprises and households benefit from the largest share of renewables. You asked also how fast we will implement. Well, indeed, first we have to request our co-legislators to treat this file as a priority file, because we don't have as much time as we had with Fit for 55 proposals that were presented 2 years ago and are still under the negotiations. But I do believe that Parliament and Council are willing to treat this as a priority, and that means that some parts of the proposal can help us already for the next year. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner. I'll take one more in the room from Kira. I'll take Kira and then Bea.
Thank you. Kira Taylor for Euractiv. So how long will it take for these measures to actually reach the consumers? How long will they actually still be facing high prices until this is solved for them? And also, I've heard some people say that this is a very targeted reform, and actually it's not the reform that is going to be needed to fully integrate renewables into the electricity market. So can you foresee another reform, maybe a few years down the line, to do this? Thank you.
Indeed, we keep the market fundamentals untouched. So the design of short-term markets remains most efficient when it comes to ensuring that the cheapest and greenest technologies are used first. And the current design guarantees that. And also this guarantees that there will be trade between member states at the moment of scarcity. So the reform will not change the mechanics of price formation on short-term market, but this does not mean that it will not achieve this decoupling of electricity prices from gas prices, because making final prices paid by consumers more independent from short-term prices. And short-term prices might be dictated by gas prices, gas-fired generation. This is one of the most important drivers for the policy proposal of this reform. And this is achieved by bringing more renewables and flexibility into the market to displace fossil fuels, and by changing the way new investments in inframarginal generation are remunerated. And these generators, they continue to be active in the short-term market, but these volatile short-term price developments will no longer determine in the large extent the consumer prices. Thank you.
Okay, Bea, and then I'll take a couple of questions online.
Hi. On contracts for difference, how will the extra revenues, in case the price market goes above the ceiling, will be collected and then channeled to consumers? Is it going to be a concrete proposal, or it's going to depend on different ways the member states do that? And then a second question on storage. The proposal provides only recommendations, then it's up to member states to decide what form of compensation they provide. And for some member states, that's a concern because they worry that they would lead to market disruptions. So I was wondering if you were concerned about this and how you plan to tackle it. And in general, I feel that a lot of the proposals within this reform still rely a lot on member states' action. So how do you plan to work with member states to make sure that the impact is rapid and that consumers can benefit from it? Thanks.
Of course, the key of the success of this reform is implementation. And this is also a priority of ours to implement the previous clean energy package. As you know, by the end of this summer, there will be a deadline to upgrade the national energy climate plans. So this is ongoing work in parallel. But on contracts for difference, the proposal requires that such money is channeled to support all electricity consumers, proportionate to their consumption based on their share of overall consumption. So this is clear there in the proposal, and we do believe that that if we can expect, for example, next year, 50 gigawatts of additional solar and more than 30 additional wind, then that means that there will be revenues above. Prediction is that it is above 12 billion euros.
Okay, I'll take a. Oh, sorry.
On storage, please.
Yes, and storage, we will incentivize storage because this helps us to replace the dependence on fossil fuel power generation, gas and oil, and well, the national concerns on specific instruments. Well, we made significant effort to take all these national concerns already on board. But of course, this is ordinary legislation, and there is a chance that Council will make amendments that will address specific national concerns on top what we already covered from our side.
Thank you. I give the floor to Christoph Hervatz.
Thank you for the question. This is Christoph Hervatz with Handelsblatt in Germany. At the moment, there are several ways to subsidize investments in, for example, nuclear power plants. And what you are proposing is that in future there are just CFDs. CFDs are in place now, but in future it's just CFDs. So why are you limiting the ways to invest money in electricity generation in a time where it is urgently needed?
We do limit future nuclear investments to CFDs only when state aid is needed. So if this is a state aid case, then there is a limitation. When future nuclear investments will materialize against the market then CFDs are not obligation for the private investors.
Thank you, Commissioner. I give the floor to Anna Hubert.
The floor. Thank you for this press conference. My question is about the impact on prices. I was wondering if you have made some calculation in order to have an idea of what could be the impact on prices for the next winter, and if you can say that if such proposal would have been in place and adopted before, 1 year before, would it have been able to avoid the crisis that we have seen in 2022? Thank you.
And actually from this press conference, I'm running directly to the plenary hall where we will have question time dedicated to the preparedness of next winter. And indeed, to be better prepared and to tackle the high and volatile prices, we have to address several challenges at the same time. We have to be ready that there might be some unpredictabilities in the gas market, but what is already agreed, we will fill our storage 90% by the beginning of November. Tomorrow, our services will announce next steps on joint gas purchase. And by doing so, by diversifying our gas supplies away from Russia, there is less room for Russia to manipulate with our markets, and that allows us to avoid these excessive price spikes like we witnessed last August. Now here in this proposal, there are several steps that are designed to protect our consumers, that allow them to opt, if they want, for less risky contractual schemes. But saying that, this is also a matter of fact that European consumer organizations have announced that in the longer run, the dynamic pricing schemes are more favorable for households. But the specific measures here will help consumers in the times of uncertainties, and for sure, we are not out of the energy crisis yet.
Thank you. As the Commissioner says, she has an appointment in plenary. I think if we can take one last question from Jorge, if he keeps it nice and short, and then we'll have to excuse the Commissioner. We can't hear you. I think that's a problem on his end.
Yes. Great, sorry. There were 4 options for the microphone. Yes, hello, Commissioner Jorge Liboreiro, Euronews. I just want to ask you, as part of this reform that you just presented on the electricity market, would you like to make savings something of a permanent mechanism in the European Union? Because last year you approved this emergency savings plan for both electricity and gas. Would you like this to be a permanent mechanism in the European Union while it travels towards climate neutrality? Thank you.
Indeed, I already discussed with national ministers the willingness to extend one of the temporary proposals under Article 122, the prolongation of gas saving obligation by 15%, and we will present very soon this proposal. There is another Article 122 proposal that addresses electricity peak hours. And based on our calculations, if we will shave the peak hours by 5 to 10%, that allows us to cut 4% of gas consumption in power generation, and that makes also a difference. So this is not decided yet, but but addressing the gas price peak hours really makes a difference and allows us to avoid excessive prices. So yes, on extending the obligation to cut gas consumption and ongoing discussions on electricity demand at peak hours.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. That brings our press conference to a close. If you have any follow-up questions, you know where to find us. Thank you.